my dear students, I hope you all are doing great. Today we'll be starting a very interesting, amazing topic of professional ethics. You know, this topic is so important that the name of my subject only has it. My subject is Advanced Auditing and Professional Ethics. So obviously this is going to be something amazing to learn. What things we are allowed to do in the profession, what we are not allowed to do in profession, what punishment a CA would be getting for doing something wrong, everything, my dear, is going to be getting covered here. And you know what the best part is? It comes for a minimum 16 to 20 marks in your exam. So considering that, we are going to learn it in such a way that it's going to become the most scoring part of auditing according to me. Okay. And now, before starting this, let's understand why I need this professional ethics and what is the meaning of the word ethics. So by nature, the word ethics means how you are supposed to behave, like principles, moral principles you are supposed to follow. Now, if you remember, when you were in school, you were having something called moral science, where they used to teach us like what is good, what is bad, correct? Same thing applies when we become professional. Being any professional means we are having a lot of responsibilities towards the society. When I talk about a CA, you can understand there are so many stakeholders who are relying on the opinion of a CA. Correct? Whenever someone comes to us, they come with so much of faith in our profession. So it is up to us, chartered accountants, that we maintain that faith. And that's exactly what this chapter is all about. Okay, this chapter, obviously they keep it in CA final because now you're just one step away from becoming a CA, entering the practical world where you're going to be facing a lot of issues, lot of dilemmas, whether I should be doing this, I should be doing that. And that's where, you know, all my answers come here. Okay, so you're going to learn this topic, understand this topic, and remember you have to imbibe it also later on in your day-to-day practice and day-to-day professional life. So let's start with it. Ethics means moral principles which govern a person's behavior or the conducting of his activities. Basically, how you are supposed to behave. That is what ethics is all about. But here I'm talking of professional ethics. So professional ethics, when I talk about, it consists of personal, organizational and corporate standards of behavior expected of professionals. So it's the way I personally behave or how I behave in an organization, in corporate world, in general in my profession, how I'm supposed to conduct or behave. Now, why is this professional ethics important? That is my third point. Because we as professionals are engaged in building trust to vast variety of users, whether it is shareholders, government, banks, potential investors, as in all the stakeholders. Now imagine if I am not doing my work properly as a chartered accountant, how am I fulfilling my responsibility towards the public, right? If at all I'm making a mistake, I would have all of this going for a toss, right? And not only that, when I talk about public interest, like all the stakeholders are involved, even my CA's name is involved. My CA's profession is involved in this. So if the CA is doing something wrong, people will not remember the name of the person who did wrong. What people will remember, oh, that CA had done, you know, there was a CA who did this wrong, right? So if Satyam case, for example, if I ask you, do you remember all the names of the people who are guilty in Satyam, all the CAs who are guilty in Satyam? We in the CA profession also, we would not know that 6 CAs were guilty under this. And you ask the names of those 6 CAs, I'm sure you would not remember that. But yes, we all know that 6 CAs were guilty. So if I am in the profession and I only don't remember the names of that person, why would a layman or a normal person remember the names of the chartered accountant who had done wrong? What they remember, CA had made a mistake. So that is the reason, my dear, you have to be very careful when it comes to ethics. See, when you become a CA, you write your name as CA so and so. Let's say CA Neha Lathi Mittal I'm writing. Now when I'm writing my name as CA Neha Lathi Mittal, my name comes after CA. So when I am carrying the word CA with me, I'm carrying a responsibility also with me that I have to maintain the dignity of that profession. That profession for which I have worked so hard to earn that degree. Now maintain that dignity, maintain that decorum, maintain that respect, and to maintain that, we have this code of ethics. Okay, so like other professionals, even CAs have the code of ethics. Other professionals, like we have doctors, lawyers, everybody has their code of ethics, and we also have that. And this code of ethics gives us ethical requirements for professional accountants. So that's the importance of having my code of ethics. Okay. Now ICAI's motto is Ya Esha Supteshu Jagrati, which is in Sanskrit and has been taken from Kathopanishad. So what exactly does this mean? Well, before I get into the meaning, if you will see, I have given you ICAI's logo over here, right? In ICAI's logo, we have got this written here down, okay? And we have an eagle over there. So when ICAI was making this entire logo, what they were thinking and what they have written this, what is the significance, and why are we seeing this in our ethics? Well, that will summarize basically what the importance of ethics is. Okay, so this basically, this term Ya Esha Supteshu Jagrati, it means eternal vigilance. Vigilance means being alert, being awake always, right? And eternal vigilance means eternally, perpetually, forever and always being alert. Now, as a CA, it is important for us to do our duty no matter whether others are doing it or not. Reason being, there's public involved here, remember, and if we don't do our work properly, it will be all the stakeholders which will be going for a toss. So it is expected that you have to always be alert and awake, and even when the world is asleep. You cannot say that, oh, so many scams are happening, so many frauds are happening, one more fraud, how does it matter? No, you cannot do that, right? So awakening when the world is asleep, what Institute is trying to say. That is the first part of my logo, right? Second part of my logo is the eagle. Now, why is Institute chosen the eagle only as the bird that we have in this logo? Reason being, eagle's journey as a bird is very, very tough, and that journey which is tough, because of that tough journey, the eagle becomes like the most strongest, mightiest of all the species of birds. Understand that. So even our CA course is not as easy as it is. It is very, very difficult. It is very, very tough, and we are also going through all these hardships, and then obviously we are becoming a very, very strong professional. So that is what they want to depict by way of a eagle here. Not only that, here I will just add to this a small story. It's a little off the topic, but it's a very interesting thing. Okay, the eagle story, I call this. What is this eagle story? Normally, in management case studies, they take this eagle case study where they give you certain attributes, physical characteristics of the eagle, and what we get to learn from them. So eagles teach us a lot of things. So I'll tell you 5 important and interesting things of the eagle, from where you also will get some motivation, and definitely you will learn something and take home today. What are these 5 things which eagle has? The first thing, like if you would be knowing, eagles, my dear, are the strongest species, I already told you, and they fly the highest. Right? If you will see any of the birds, nobody can reach the height of that eagle. So the altitude with which the eagles fly is very, very high. So in that particular situation, if you will understand, we have to learn from the eagles to try to fly as high as possible. In fact, the highest. And when you will be at the top over there, you will be having only like-minded birds around you, like eagles around you. So that's what they try to say, that you should aim high. That is the first thing that I learned from an eagle. Second thing is, now, in spite of flying so high, the eagle has a very, very sharp eyesight. And even if it is there right in the sky, really, really high, it can see even a small rat which is running maybe on the field. And when it sees it, it will want to catch that rat. So it will be like literally flying behind it, and it will not lose the sight of that rat till it actually goes, swoops down and catches it. So what do you learn from this? You learn that no matter how far your goal is, remember, to achieve that goal, you have to always keep it in front of you. It should be always in sight. Remember, out of sight is out of mind. So it should always be there, and you should always be focused no matter how far it is. and don't let anything else around you bother you. So just be like that eagle there. The third thing that we learn from the eagle is that, you know, when eagles are very small, okay, like baby eagles, and now it is time for the mother to make the baby eagle fly. It wants to teach the baby eagle to fly. So what does the mother do? Normally, other birds, what they would be doing? They would be teaching them how to fly. But mother eagle does not do that. She takes the baby, okay, the baby eagle, right from the nest it is taken, and she goes to a deep, deep cliff, okay, and from there it just throws the baby. Now imagine that small baby, which poor thing, right from the nest, it doesn't know where it is, how it is, and it is coming down, down, down. And at that time, the baby realizes, obviously it must be really scared, and then suddenly it realizes that it has got wings, and it opens its wings and it learns how to fly. So remember, what we learn from this is that in spite of the most difficult of situations that you're falling in, right, you should always learn to fight it back. And maybe at that point of time, you will be learning what, or you will be coming to know what is your biggest strength. Like the eagle discovered that it has got wings at that point. In the most adverse situation, they have realized that. So that is what we get to learn from this. Now, one more interesting thing is that if you have ever seen there is a windy atmosphere, or there's lots of like storm is there, at that time you'll see all the birds will go and sit in their nest. Like they get scared and they go and sit in their nest. But that time you will see that the eagle, my dear, is always soaring in the sky. It is not going and sitting in the nest. Literally, it will open its wings and it is going to be just literally, I would say, just swaying around with the wind. So what do you mean and what do you learn from this? You learn that no matter how difficult the situation will be, right? Like the wind is coming, it's like all stormy, nobody is there, but still the eagle does not leave it. In fact, it takes the wind to its advantage, and rather than flapping its wings, it just goes with the wind and just goes on swaying here and there, enjoying this, even this phase that has come. So that's what we learn from them. Okay, no matter how tough the situation is, learn to face it. Don't go and hide in that nest of yours. Right? Now comes the last point. Now, when the eagle is almost 35-40 years of age, now the eagle has become old. Now it is almost about to die. Now there are two choices that the eagle faces. One, just die, or second, fight for life. So the eagles choose the second thing, fight for life. What is this fight for life? What is the meaning of this? So the eagle goes to some high mountain and it sits on some tree over there. So like, right on some height it goes. The first thing that the eagle does is now, it just plucks all its feathers with its beak. It just plucks out all its feathers. Now obviously feathers are not there. So the eagle, my dear, cannot fly now much. It can just move a little bit here and there. Then afterwards, it has these really sharp claws. Okay. So it takes those claws and it keeps, scratching on the bark of the tree so that all its claws become like blunt. Okay. All those sharp claws become blunt. Then, my dear, it takes its beak, which is very strong, and keeps pecking it on that tree. So by doing that pecking on the tree, the entire beak also is almost become like not very sharp. It's become very blunt. And now you can imagine the eagle. This huge giant bird now has become like a small, without feathers, not having any strong beak, not having any claws. It's so vulnerable at that time. And that time, my dear, it just in this situation, it stays like this for 150 days, my dear. 150 days, imagine. In this 150 days, it is cold, the weather is bad, it does not have much food, it cannot move much, it is extremely vulnerable, but it stands, it is there for 150 days. And after 150 days, everything grows back. Whether it is its beak, whether feathers, whether it's claws. Some eagles might die in this 150 days, but most of them survive. And after this, my dear, they live for another 30 years. Yes. So I find this to be the most fascinating thing to take from the eagle. No matter how tough it is, those 150 days, my dear, is a metaphor which could be anything. Everyone in life is going to face this, where one point or one phase will come where you would feel that this is the end of it. I don't know where to go from here. Right? This is very, very difficult. And mind it, in CA, this comes even faster, this phase. Okay. So you feel that. Remember, never ever give up. Survive those 150 days with all your strength, with all your determination, and trust me, after facing that, you're going to be getting something really, really good worth this entire efforts. Right? They always say the darkest hour is just before dawn. Right? So before morning, there's always going to be this big night. But don't worry, it will pass. And that's what we learned from the eagle. Now you understood why institutes, this entire logo is such an amazing, a thought behind it. The one who has designed it, amazing thought behind it, right? So coming back to our topic now, basically, so code of ethics is for the profession as a whole, and it is a shield that helps us to command respect in the society, right? So this is all about introduction. What is ethics? Why we need ethics? About the eagle, and about our motto also. So I hope you understood all this. And now we will get into the real chapter. Correct? This was all just an intro. Now, here comes my application of the code. So I told you we have a code of ethics. This code of ethics, my dear, is more or less an accountant's code of ethics, which is on a global level. So based on this only, we also have a code of ethics. So what exactly is here? Now you will see there is part A of this ethics now. We have part A, B and C. Part A deals with ethics for professional accountants and giving you a conceptual framework based on which your ethics is going to be designed, your entire ethics, okay? Part B and C tells you about public practice, who's practicing accountants, what they are supposed to be doing, and part C applies to professional accountants in business, okay? But of course, our main focus is going to be on part A. Reason being part A and B actually, so that we understand what exactly and on what principles my entire code of ethics is based, okay? So you just need to understand these points, not that they will ask you direct questions on this, but institute material has this, so we need to get it, okay? So coming to section 100, a professional accountant's responsibility is not exclusively to satisfy the needs of an individual client or employer, but also acting in public interest. This we already said. So he has to comply with the ethical requirements of the code. The code is divided in three parts. We said part A, part B, part C. Part A gives us a conceptual framework within which we have to apply those ethics. Okay. It gives us guidance on how to form the principles or what basis we are going to do it on. And accountants are required to apply this framework to identify threats and the safeguards to those threats. Okay, so we have threats to independence and what are the safeguards that we have to see there. Okay, part B and C, as I already told you, is for public practice accountants or as well as for business. Okay. So now let's go to the fundamental principles. So we have basically 5 fundamental principles, extremely important, and generally, like everywhere, these accountants, I mean in the whole world, I'm saying, not only in ICI, I'm not saying only for Indian CAs, but everybody has to follow this. Okay. So first one is integrity. What is the meaning of integrity? You can see there in the picture I've told you. Integrity simply means honesty. Being extremely honest, okay? And that, my dear, has to be like the first thing. As a professional, the first thing that we can expect from you is being honest. Now, integrity gives us an obligation of being straightforward and honest. In professional, business relationships, everywhere, you have to be honest, right? It's just very necessary. The first thing that you have to take care of. Right? You should not be associated with reports, returns, communications where you believe that there's false information, there's reckless means carelessly given information, or it is omitting certain facts, so it is obscuring, it is not showing it in the correct way. Okay, they are kind of manipulating it. So all that would be coming here. So you should never be involved in this. That should be the case. A professional accountant will not be considered to be in breach if he is doing it doing this work but giving a modified report. So if you're giving a qualified opinion or disclaimer or adverse in this situation, then you have still maintained your integrity. Okay, so you have to be honest. That is the first thing which is expected, right? First. Second thing, objectivity. What is the meaning of the word objective? Objective means you are, see, it's like the opposite of the word subjective. Subjective means which changes from situation to situation, person to person, right? You can't do that. You have to be objective and clear, unbiased in your mind. Okay, it cannot be that you go to a big client, a very, very big company, and there, my dear, somewhere your objectivity or independence gets hampered because you're a little scared or you're afraid of that situation. Cannot be. So what we are trying to say is you have to be the same everywhere. Okay, it means an obligation not to compromise their professional or business judgment because of bias, conflict of interest, influence of others, nothing doing. You just have to be completely objective and do your work. Okay, if at all you are feeling that this could somewhere hamper my objectivity or independence, you should avoid those kind of relationships altogether. Okay, so if at all you feel somewhere that now a very big company has come to you for audit, and you know that as a chartered accountant, maybe you are feeling that my objectivity or my independence may be hampered. I don't think I will be able to give my 100% and be clear or do my work properly. Then in that case, you should not take up that work only. That is what objectivity says. Being totally unbiased, totally straightforward, honest, and not getting influenced by anyone. Okay, so that's the meaning of the word objective, and you have to maintain objectivity. That is my point. Okay, so these are my two things now. Third thing, professional competence and due care. Right? So as a CA, when you go, you're doing your work, you are literally, I would say, you're literally pointing out fingers, mistakes, what others have done, what everything is wrong. And what if that person answers back to you saying that you also don't know anything, right? What you are teaching me, you don't know anything. If this happens, my dear, where is your respect? So you have to be competent, skilled enough, knowledgeable enough. Okay, professional competence means you should be skilled and knowledgeable in your profession. And then only, my dear, you will be able to tell other people to do something correct or correct them, tell them that they are wrong, right? And you will be able to demand respect, basically. So being competent is one thing. Now I am competent, I am technically qualified, I am professional, everything is fine. But when I'm doing my work, if I do it carelessly, I'm not doing it properly, then in that case, my dear, where the competence is gone for a toss. Right? Being competent is one thing and due care is another thing. You have to do that work also with the entire competence and with your 100% you have to give to that work. Now for this, I'll give a very simple example in terms of your exam. Okay. Now as a CA, when as a student, when I'm writing the exam, I have studied everything. I've done everything properly. I have the knowledge. I have everything. But when I go in that paper, I go and do silly mistakes. I don't read the question properly. Okay. I don't write it properly, or I write it with half-baked interest. In all this situation, what do you think? I am competent, but I am not taking due care. So we want both the things, right? So let's understand. This principle of competence and due care tells us to maintain our knowledge and skill to the level required for doing that service, that professional service. Not only that, I have to act also diligently, very carefully, very properly. I have to do my work. Competent professional service requires the exercise of sound judgment. You can highlight along with me, remember, sound judgment. And competence may be divided in two parts. One, attainment, achieving the competence, And second, maintaining the competence. Now, what is the meaning of this? When I say attaining the competence means I am achieving it, right? How do I achieve it? When I'm earning my degree, when I'm working for my degree, whether my foundation, my intermediate, my final, all that is attainment. And after becoming a CA, you have to also maintain it. How will you maintain it? You know, institute has got CP hours where we have to sit and, you know, do extra, like continuing professional education, where we have that competence and we have to maintain it. Every year, certain number of hours you have to give for your profession. That means you're maintaining it also, right? So what happens is over time, knowledge gets outdated and new things keep coming up. So you have to maintain that also, right? So the maintenance requires awareness, understanding. And for diligence, basically what I need to do is I have to take the responsibility to act in accordance with the requirement of the assignment. And remember, you should take all the steps to ensure that those working under the professional authority is also doing it in a professional capacity. Now, the fourth one I have is my principle of confidentiality. What do you mean by confidential? Confidential means something which is not to be disclosed. It is something which is like secret, okay? Now we, being chartered accountants, we come across our clients, almost all the data of the clients I know, entire financials I know their business secrets also to some extent. So in that case, I can misuse this information. I can, right? So that is what my profession requires. I should not misuse this information. And for that reason, confidentiality principle is there. Okay? Because again, the clients give me all this data, all this information, all this in my professional capacity. And I'm misusing this information, right? By telling others about it, or by somewhere, you know, maybe selling the ideas to the competitor. See, there can be anything which a CA can do. But that's exactly what my ethics say. You should not obviously do it, right? So confidentiality is about that. It refrains, avoids, not allowed, okay? Disallows what? An accountant to disclose outside the firm any confidential information which is acquired without proper authority or unless there's a legal professional duty to disclose. So within this one sentence, I can see two exceptions. They're saying you should not disclose outside the firm whatever you have acquired in your professional capacity. That's okay. Without proper authority, and that's one thing. So if I have the authority to disclose it, then yes, I can. Secondly, they say, or unless there's a legal professional duty to disclose. Means somewhere, these are my two exceptions. Huh? If I get proper authority to disclose something, that is one thing. Or secondly, there is a legal professional responsibility on me to disclose it. Then I have to disclose those things, right? So for example, a client has done a fraud. Now, if client has done a fraud, can I say, oh, confidential, I cannot tell anyone? That is your professional duty to tell, right? So then there you have to do it. So professional duty, your confidentiality is there, but you have to see two things. Either one, properly authorized or so, they are allowing you to disclose it, or secondly, legal professional duty. If it's legal professional duty, nothing doing. You have to disclose it, okay? Or secondly, you should also not use your confidential information in terms of taking personal advantage or advantage of third parties. No, not allowed to. So you can't disclose it, you can't take advantage of it. Obviously, reason is simple, because it has come with a lot of trust to you. Okay. Now, I have to maintain confidentiality as a chartered accountant. I understood that. That's okay. But then my staff is also going there. My articles are also going there. So then I only have to take all the reasonable steps to ensure that staff and persons from whom I'm taking the advice and assistance also maintain confidentiality. So it's not only you, but also it has to be maintained by your team, entire audit team. You have to comply with the confidentiality principle even after the end of the relationship, right? Like I already told you, there are situations where you may have to disclose the information when either it is permitted by law, authorized by the client, or it is required by the law, or you have a professional duty to disclose it. So we already saw those points over there, right? And whenever you are doing this, you have to, my dear, like professional duty, they've given examples. If quality review is happening, peer review is happening, then you can do it. We have this peer review, quality review. We have it in our third book, this, this chapter. Or responding to some investigation, right? Or some legal proceedings are going on, or some ethical requirement is there, then you will have to disclose it. So that is what we are trying to say. So confidentiality basically means secrecy. Maintain the secrets of the client unless those exceptions are there, right? Next, they say auditor, a CA, should keep his eyes and ears open. Eyes and ears open, but his mouth shut. That is the meaning of this word confidential, right? And when we go for office and we go for audits, what we do exactly? I think exactly opposite we do. As articles, we keep our eyes and ears closed and our mouth open. Blah, 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 continuously. You know what I saw in that audit? I'm going to this place and I'm seeing this here. Somewhere unknowingly, my dear, you are breaking this confidentiality principle. So even when I give you examples, wherever I give you examples, I will never name the client. Reason is simple. Even I have to maintain the confidentiality. Okay, so that is what it is all about. Now the fifth and the last one we have, okay, professional behavior. So being professional is one thing, and behaving professionally is you are going to be behaving properly as per the laws and regulations, avoiding any action which will bring discredit to the profession, disrepute, bad name to the profession, right? So CA always is being late. He never comes on time. Okay, that is also somewhere bringing disrepute, unprofessional behavior. Then the way he dresses himself. Okay, so he just goes to the office in some shorts and some chappals he wears and he goes. That's unprofessional, right? So professional behavior means you complying with laws and regulations, of course, and everything that you do, my dear, is meant for the good name of the profession. Don't do anything which will bring bad name to the profession. That's what we are trying to say. Even while marketing yourselves, now marketing as such is not really allowed directly, but there are some ways which you can do it. So if you're marketing and again doing something like that, again you can't bring any disrepute to the profession. Okay, so that also not allowed. You should not also make exaggerated claims for the services, qualifications, you're like over showing them, or you're flaunting them to a large extent, experience you're talking and bluffing about, or just praising about yourself, making comparisons to the work of others. All this, my dear, is not professional. You have to behave properly, and all these are my 5 important points which okay, you can remember this I pass CPT or I pass CPA, but that A or T has no significance. I have only those 5 points. Okay, so what are those 5 points? O, objectivity. I, integrity. Then P, what is P? Professional competence and due care. C, confidentiality. And again P, professional behavior. Okay, so that's what I have over here. I hope you understood the 5 important, the conceptual framework within which my entire code of ethics is based. Okay, so this is what you have in your first 5 points, code of ethics principles. Then part B now. This part of the code illustrates how this conceptual framework will be applied by professional accountants in public practice. We just said, okay, and part C deals with same thing, how you will apply these 5 principles to your CAs who are in business. So now let's see part B. This is also very important for me, threats and safeguards. You can star mark this. So whenever you comply with your this entire principles, okay, there are chances, my dear, that you will be threatened by these 5 threats. Okay, 5 threats, and we have some examples for them. So this is also, I would say, my threats to my independence as an auditor. What are the threats? The first one, self-interest threats. The meaning of self-interest, obviously you are somewhere personally interested in something. Then in that case, you think you're going to be giving your 100% and you can be objective and all this. Can you be independent in this situation when you are having some financial or other interest? Best example, let's say you are holding shares in a company, right? If I am holding shares, somewhere I'm having interest in that company. And if I have interest in the company, how can I give my 100% there? And that will be a big threat to my independence, right? So self-interest threat, best example is in terms of having any kind of investment in that company. Okay, that is one. Other examples also they have given, like have too much of dependence on the fees from the client. So the fees that the client is giving me is very big amount. So then obviously I cannot afford to lose that client. It will affect my independence. It becomes a self-interest. Now that doesn't mean they're saying do your work free of cost. No, but totally depending. So if I have got a business, I mean I have my practice, and in my practice 50% of the fees is coming from one client. Okay, so 50% fees coming from one client, I can't afford to lose that client in any way, and therefore I would do anything to keep that client, and that will some way hamper my objectivity. That's why not correct. Close business relationship you're having, or you have the concern about losing that client, or you have a employment, potential employment. They say right now you do my work, then we will employ you or something like that. This kind of situation somewhere will hamper my independence. Contingent fees. Know what is contingent fees? Based on a percentage of something. So then I'll get biased. Now I would want to get more fees. So then in that case, I will try to do something in such a way that I'll get extra fees. So I can't have contingent fees. Or loan to or from the client, directors, etc. Somewhere again my self-interest comes in picture. And this would not be correct. And you have got good examples here in Companies Act also, which try to protect you from this. See, I told you there is threats and there are safeguards. So right now I'm seeing the threats, and then we'll see the safeguards also which we have. Okay. Second threat I see is a self-review threat. Self-review means what? You are judging yourself. Means what? Basically, this judgment which is there needs to be reevaluated by the professional responsible for the judgment. For example, you are writing a paper. You are writing a paper and you yourself are giving marks to that paper. You think you can be totally independent in this case? Obviously not, because you have only done it, right? So if you do something and you only check it, then obviously you're going to say this is the best because I have done it. What's the use, right? So independence would be hampered, and self-review basically means that only, where you should not review what work you have done. Example, you're discovering some error afterwards, but then how will you accept it? Because you have only done that work. Reporting on the financial systems. Remember 143I requires me to report on the system, and 144 tells me that I'm not allowed to design the system. A reason? Simple. If I design the system and I only give opinion on the system, obviously I'll say it's the best. Not allowed. Another example, you only have prepared the original data. I only do the accounting, I only do the auditing. Not correct. Not allowed also. So all these are example self-review threats, okay? A member of the team has been a director officer of that client. So when you are the director officer of that client, you have done certain work. Now you only are going and doing the checking again. Not correct. Performing a service which directly affects the subject matter of the assurance engagement, like giving some investment related advisory, investment advisory services you're giving. Again, same thing. And then you're only reviewing the investments area also. Not correct. So all these are the examples where self-review. You only doing the thing and you only judging it. You only checking it. Okay. Third is advocacy. Now, advocacy threat means what? It occurs when an accountant promotes a position or opinion to a point somewhere that he feels his objectivity may be compromised. Means you are so much into it and you're promoting that to such an extent that you yourself may somewhere get biased in that. So I think this point you will understand better with an example. See, promoting shares in a listed entity when that entity is a FS audit client. What does this mean? You are doing the financial statements audit and you're only promoting the shares of that. So in that case, somewhere you are going to be, because it's you are promoting it, you will obviously be biased towards it. And you cannot be independent when you will do the audit then. So that is the thing. Or acting as an advocate for litigations and disputes. Even better example. You are the lawyer of that company also. I'm a CA, I'm also a lawyer. So I'm sitting and I'm fighting the client's case. Now tell me, if I'm fighting the client's case, will I accept that you need to make a provision for the loss? I will obviously always say that no, you will win the case, don't worry. Because I am doing it, right? So that's the reason advocacy threat would be coming. And the fourth one I have is familiarity threat. What is this familiarity threat? This, my dear, because of the relationship, professional accountant becomes too sympathetic to the interest of the client, others, etc. So somewhere I start developing this soft corner, somewhere about my client, or I'm very familiar with them, I'm very friendly with them, then that familiarity threat will happen. For example, for let's say 20 years I'm doing the audit of that client. For 20 years. Now tell me, 20 years is such a long time. I know everything in and out of the client. I know everything, even his personal everything I know. He knows my working style. He knows how I work. And he will say, Are, so many years we have been together, so you can understand. That kind of, understand position should not come. So familiarity threat means you are too friendly, too knowing the client to an extent that you start sympathizing with him. Okay. And that's exactly what example would be having close immediate family relationship with a director or someone. Then in that case, it's too familiar, right? So your father is a managing director of a company and you become the auditor. Too familiar, right? So it's difficult for you to maintain your independence. Accepting gifts, right? So accepting gifts also somewhere is going to hamper this. Long association with them, 20 years. You think gifts would be hampering your independence? See, normally small gifts here and there like Diwali gifts come, it's okay. But sometimes if you're having something like big or taking undue favors from the client, then my dear, when you take a favor, then you have to return it also. So that's why that familiarity threat doesn't, it would have problems on your behavior. And last one I have is intimidation. Intimidation is where you are deterred, you are prevented from acting objectively by threats, actual or perceived. So somewhere I am getting this fear of insult, or maybe they will remove me from the audit, and that intimidation, that fear makes me do the wrong thing. Okay, so intimidation threat, example being they will dismiss me, they will remove me, they will replace me, there will be a case, legal suit which they could file, or I'm being pressured to reduce my work in order to reduce the fees. That means somewhere they are trying to pressurize you. Okay, that is intimidation threat and you are getting pressured. Okay, wherever you feel any of these 5 threats are happening, my dear, leave that work. Don't sit and do it, because these 5 things are very, very important. Okay, so what are the 5 threats to your independence, threats to your compliances? We call it S SAFI. S SAFI. What is that? First S, self-interest. I'm having interest in that. I'm having shares, or I'm having some kind of, investment or whatever in it. Again S, self-review. You yourself are only doing what? Reviewing what you have done. That only you are sitting and checking. A, advocacy threats. What is advocacy? Means you are being to the extent that somewhere you are like promoting the client only to such an extent that your objectivity will get hampered. F, familiar. Too familiar, too sympathetic with the clients. Or I, intimidation threats. So these are the 5 threats, and yes, you can get a direct questions. What are the threats to independence with examples? At least 2-3 examples of each one you should know. Okay. While teaching you the threat, somewhere I also went into the safeguards. Well, if you will see the next one, that is my safeguards. I've already somewhere got into it. Okay. Safeguards try to eliminate or reduce the threats. What kind of safeguards? We have two kinds of safeguards. Safeguard 1, created by the professional legislation or regulation. Professional means maybe my CA, ethics. Laws or regulations, we have got our CA Act, we have got our Companies Act. Somewhere these are trying to safeguard these threats. Best example what we can have for this? My entire now ethics which I'm going to be learning in this chapter, we're going to have so many schedules, we're going to have 2 schedules, we're going to have so many clauses. You will see that most of the clauses are trying to safeguard this one. For example, one of the clauses says that you can't charge your fees on percentage basis. What does this mean? You can't charge your fees on percentage because it become a contingent basis. That will become like a self-interest threat, and therefore they will not want it. So that is one example. For CA Act, for Companies Act, what example I have? My entire section 141, 141(3) disqualification, somewhere is about this only, na? I am not allowed to be an officer employee of the company. I mean, I can't be the auditor if I'm officer employee. Independence hampered, right? Then I'm not allowed to hold investments, securities, or be indebted to the company, correct? So that could also be example for this. I'm not allowed to give section 144 services because that will also mean to somewhere my threat is coming. So all these things are not allowed. So the best example for Companies Act is section 141(3). 144. Okay, for intimidation threats, you have got removal of auditor. Section 140. Whenever we resign, remember, or when we are getting removed, we have to take permission from the central government. Why? So that we don't have that intimidation threat. They will remove me. No. Permission of CG is required for that. Intimidation threat example, right? When we resign, that time shareholders have to be called. So when we resign, I said, shareholders have to come now, which clearly means that somewhere all these threats are being taken care of even by my Companies Act. My ethics are there, right? My CA Act is there. All of this. So first safeguard we have is in the form of created by profession, legislation, regulation. Even section 140 you can take as an example. Okay. Then safeguards. Now second one I have is in my work environment. Work environment is in my office, in my working. We have got two things. One is firm wide. This is for my entire firm. For the entire my firm, we are having safeguards, and one we have for the particular client also. So if I have firm wide safeguards, what we have proper policies which are documented. We have quality controls. We have proper leadership. We have quality controls, QC policies. We don't rely too much on fees from single client. We have proper training and education. See all these, my dear. Policies to communicate concerns to seniors in the firm, disciplinary mechanism in the firm itself. So all this is going to be in my office level. See, in my office also, when you go, you have certain training which is given, where they tell you what you're supposed to do, what you're not supposed to do, what quality controls are there, and all that is to safeguard against these threats only. Okay. And second is when you go for that particular client audit, for that particular specific engagement, then you can also require third-party consulting, expert consulting, reviewing the work done, rotating the senior people, who are in the team, the partner in charge also, discussing the ethical issues, services provided, fees charged. All this is going to be my individual engagement specific safeguards. Okay. Like when we were doing articleship, okay, we had this, we had two rather articles whose parents, as in whose business was also under the audit of our CM, our sir. Means what I'm trying to say is our clients' children were articles in our firm. Okay, so now this sir could take them as articles. That was not a problem. But whenever there is to be audit, they used to not send him to that like father's business. Okay, so that was the safeguard we had for engagement specific safeguard. Okay, so for this audit, no, his son cannot go or his daughter cannot go. That is what we are trying to say. Okay, so we have got now this entire code of ethics, which needs to be understood and remembered. Okay. Part C, I'll just finish first and then I'll just summarize what we learned. Part C is just about how applying this code to professional accountants in business, but we have not got this in detail or much because that's main is practice area which we need to understand. Okay, so part A, part B, part C is just a conceptual framework and the basics before starting with my ethics. Now, what all did we learn? Let's quickly see this. First thing what we learned was about our principles, right? Our 5 principles we learned. Where are those 5 principles? O, I pass CPA, but A is not relevant. Only O, I pass CP is there, right? So we have those 5. Here. Quickly, I'm summarizing what we saw. The fundamental principles. Which are the fundamental principles? Quickly. O stands for objectivity, integrity, professional competence and due care, confidentiality, and P again professional behavior. Okay. Then we learned about the threats to independence or threats that we have to for these fundamental principles, which we said S SAFI. What were those threats? Self-interest, self-review, advocacy, familiarity, and I, that is my intimidation. One more example I just remembered for rotation of auditors, familiarity threat. To reduce that threat, we have rotation now. After 5 years or 10 years, rotation has been made. All that is to avoid the familiarity. So you can also take the example of rotation of auditors. This is there. And then after that we saw safeguards. Safeguards are in 2 areas. Which are the 2 areas we have? One is we have firm level. All your quality controls and all your proper systems are in place or not. The fees and all that you are charging. And one is specific to the client. Okay, now. So this is what we have learned so far. Going further. Now we are starting with our CA Act overview. We are going to be learning in this chapter certain important sections, not the entire CA Act you need to know, certain important sections, and particularly we have to focus on misconduct. Okay, so now we will be starting with this. First thing we have is overview of the CA Act. What are the main chapters we have, what is covered in that, etc. Okay. The first chapter we have is preliminary basics, where we have applicability of the act and definitions. Second we have is about ICAI, correct? Who can be the register, who can be a member, who's like in a COP, how it can be cancelled and all those things. Then council of the institute, election and all those things are there. Register of members which is maintained, removal from the register, the 4th part, section 19 and 20. Then this misconduct is important. The entire disciplinary mechanism, this is what you need to know. To some extent, section 3 to 8 also we need to know. Then regional councils, penalties, quality review board and other miscellaneous points. So the main focus is going to be on these 2 areas. One and this misconduct area. Okay. Others, little bit here and there we will have, but not so much in deep. Okay. So now, who can be a chartered accountant? Well, the first thing that will come in your mind, yes, I can be a chartered, I will be a chartered accountant, of course. But here we are saying in technical terms, who can be a CA? So CA will be a person who has cleared his final exams, of course, and who has completed his training. Which training are we talking about? You know, we have our articleship training, we have that ITT, that course that you have. Everything, all your training is over and you have finished with your GMCS. Right? So all these things once you have done, then only you will become a CA. And here we have now students, the moment they clear their CA final exams, right? What they go and they update on Facebook? Yippee, I'm CA so and so. Correct? Can you write I'm CA so and so right now? The first thing that you have done after clearing your CA final exam, you have created a misconduct. You can't call yourself CA so and so right now because you're still not a member of the institute. Remember, and you have still not completed your training or your GMCS and all is pending, your form you have to write and ask for, or membership, all that is pending, and there you sit and update, yippee, I'm CA so and so, finished. First misconduct you have done already. Okay. Next, section 2, subsection 2. To be in practice. What is the meaning of to be in practice? This word just seems very easy. To be in practice, I am practicing. So what? But there are a lot of small things in this, okay? A member shall be deemed to be in practice. Deemed to be in practice. See my word. I am not saying that you are taking on a COP and then only you will be in practice. No. If you are doing any of this in spite of not taking a COP, you are still deemed to be in practice. So here you have done two wrong things. One, you have not taken a COP and you have started practice. That is the first mistake you have done. Second thing, if you have done this, then whatever misconduct is associated with being in practice will apply to you now, because you are deemed to be in practice whether or not you have taken the COP. When you will be deemed to be in practice? When either you are individually alone, sole proprietor, or in partnership. Either individually or in partnership with CAs in practice, you have remuneration received or you are going to receive remuneration out of these four things. Which four things? One, you have engaged yourself in the practice of accountancy. So if you're an accountant, you're holding yourself as, you are deemed to be in practice. Or you are doing services involving audit, verifying books, preparing financial statements, verifying them, or telling the public that you are an accountant, my dear, you are deemed to be in practice. Okay, so either accounts you're doing, or you're giving service of auditing, verification of books, or making the financial statements, etc. Still you are considered to be in practice. Third, you're rendering professional services or helping about matters relating to accounting procedure, recording, presenting, certifying financial facts or data. So professional services you're giving, or accounting procedure related, you're giving some consultancy or certifications you're doing as a CA, all that you're deemed to be in practice. And fourth, rendering any such other services. Now when I say other services, as in the opinion of the council, may be rendered by CA in practice. So 1, 2, 3 is very clear what they wanted to say. First, they say that either you're in accountancy practice or you're performing services relating to audit, verification and all that. Third, they say professional services, right? Fourth, they say other services. So what are these other services? For that, you will just turn the page, you will see one list of almost 22 points is given there. Did you see that? So these are the other services which we will discuss separately. Okay. Before that, what I want you to see is this. Let me complete with this. So section 2.2 of my CA Act says that you are deemed to be in practice if you are doing any of these things. 1. Also, an associate or a fellow who is a salaried employee of a CA in practice, salaried CA under a CA in practice, will be deemed to be in practice for the purpose of training articles. You know, we can take certain articles even in the name of my employee CA. So he's deemed to be in practice for that limited purpose of taking articles. Of course, he can't sign on behalf of the firm. No, he cannot. We don't count him like that. But he is considered to be for the purpose of taking articles, I can take him in picture. Okay. Then, if a member accepts any of the following in his professional capacity, not on full-time salary basis, okay, but on professional basis, if you are doing liquidator, you are being a liquidator, trustee, executor, arbitrator, you know, for our executor is for under the will of a person, if some execution is required, you're doing that, or trustee, you have been receiver, advisor, representing for cost, finance, etc., taxation matters. Any of this, my dear, you're doing on a professional basis, then you would be considered to be in practice. or he's appointed by CG or state government, central government, court, legal authority, or acts as a secretary, whatever be it, all of that, my dear, would be considered to be in practice. And then, if at all you are rendering service with armed forces, if you are rendering service, so with my defense, if you are giving service, you are again deemed to be in practice even in that case. What does that mean? Defense is, my dear, a very, very crucial, very vulnerable, very important area, right? There, all my ethics have to be like 100% applied. So for that purpose, you are considered to be in practice. So they can take action against you if you're doing anything wrong there. Okay, so that is the point over here. And now comes the main point. Other services, what all is included in this 224? See, 224. They said na, other services which the council may decide. So they said that management, consultancy and other services under section 224 includes. Now includes so many things. Okay. All these things means, am I allowed to do all these things? Yes, I'm allowed to do it. 100% yes, I'm allowed to do these things. There's no problem in doing these things. But if you're doing any of these things, right, it is deemed that you are in practice. So you would think that I am not doing audit, I am not doing accounts, but I am doing, let's say, amalgamation and mergers advice I'm giving to clients. Only that. How can you say I'm in practice? Yes, you are in practice, because 224 has said other services, and other services includes those. So you will be deemed to be in practice even if you're giving advice regarding amalgamation and mergers. Okay, so this is the list of all those 20 things which I'm allowed to do as a CA, no problem. But yes, only as a practicing CA, you can do this. If you have not taken a COP, you better take one. If you have not taken a COP, you will be punished for not taking it. But you will also be punished for doing any misconduct as a practicing chartered accountant, because you are deemed to be in practice. Okay, so let's do it. First thing what you can do. FM planning, financial management planning you can do. Capital structure also comes in financial management. Working capital management, project report somewhere comes under finance. Okay, all those things, my dear, if you're doing, consider to be in practice. Management operational audit, other services. Okay, amalgamation mergers advisory you're giving. System analysis, computer related services, making cash budgets, cash flow statement, profitability statements, capital budgets, revenue budgets. See, all this is finance related. You have learned this in your financial management, in your intermediate, okay? Budgeting, inventory management, all that. Quality audit, environmental audit, energy audit, everything is there. All these audits, if you're doing, you're considered to be in practice. Price fixation, personnel recruitment. Now, this is an interesting point. Many times clients tell us that, please, can you give me an accountant, or can you help me in some, recruitments, and CA thinks, can I do this? Am I allowed to do this? Yes, you're allowed to do it. Personal recruitment is allowed. You can do that. Not only that, you can also develop HR, including training programs. So work study, training programs. Client tells you, please take a workshop. GST has come. My employees don't understand GST. Please give them a workshop. Please give them training. Can I do it? Yes, I can do it. Then acts as an advisor to an issue of shares I'm talking about. Can I do advisory on that? Yes, you can. Absolutely allowed to do that. But see, not doing what? Not doing activities of broking, underwriting and portfolio management. So broking, I cannot be a broker, I cannot be an underwriter, and I cannot give portfolio management services. Now you will think, why I can't do that, correct? Because that's a different area altogether. It's more like a business that you're doing in broking, underwriting, portfolio management. That means I will never be allowed to do this. If I want to do broking, I want to do underwriting, I want to do portfolio management, go ahead, do it. But you cannot be a practicing CA there. You can't hold a COP and do this. I want to do only portfolio management. You can use your CA degree there. You can do CA, you can do CFA and do that. But you cannot practice them. That is my point. Okay. Then setting up executive incentive plans. So, incentives and all. Sometimes company asks you, help us to design the incentive plans. So am I allowed to do that? Yes, I'm allowed to do that. Cash budgets, cash flow statement, profitability statement. I think this has already happened, this point. Cost control, management systems, recovery consultant. You can be in banking sector. Banking sector recovery issues are there. So sometimes they ask you, can you advise us how we can recover? Yes, you can. But can you be a recovery agent here? Can you sit and become a recovery agent? Those people who come and do recovery from people, like Vasuli types, can you do that? No, that is not allowed. Recovery consultant, acting as, done. But recovery agent, no, not allowed. Okay. I hope you write down all these small points which I tell you. Okay. See, I tell you in the flow of things, but you have to keep a track of whatever I'm saying, important things. Jot it down, keep it, write it here. Okay. Then, can I do insurance, financial advisory services? Yes. Insurance brokerage, to some extent, yes, I'm allowed. What I'm allowed, what I'm not allowed, we'll learn it little later when we do our first schedule. Okay. Acting as a registrar to an issue, investment counseling. Now you will think counseling you allow and portfolio management you don't allow. There's a difference. Counseling means pure advice. Client asks, can I take this policy or should I take that policy? Should I invest in government bonds? Should I invest in equity shares? This is counseling. But portfolio management is where you are managing their investments with you. So you tell the client, no headache, everything I will manage. You give me the money, I will do the portfolio services, I will generate returns for you, I will do this. This is portfolio management. And advisory, simply they're asking and I'm answering. That is allowed. Okay. So these 22 things are there which we as practicing CAs are allowed to do, or in another way, if we are doing all this, it is assumed that we are in practice. Okay. So go through this whole list once. It's extremely, extremely important. You do have case studies coming directly from this area. Okay. So do that properly. Just go through this list once again. So I hope this is clear. Okay. One important note I've said, or rather two notes, correlate this with my section 144. See, if I say investment counseling, correct? Investment advisory, you're allowed to do. Yes, you're allowed to do it. But section 144 says that you're not allowed to give these services to your client, as in to the company, or you will get disqualified if you're giving these services to a company for being the auditor. Then in that case, I will not be allowed to give it to that company. I'm allowed investment advisory, but I'm not allowed to give it to the company where I'm an auditor. So you have to correlate that 144 there. Okay, you have to follow both, remember. And CA is deemed to be in practice even if he offers to render the services. See, why is that? Even if I offer to render the services, if you will see, read carefully, you'll understand why this point is there. He is in consideration of remuneration received or to be received, right? Either ways. Or he's rendering such other services. He's offering the services also, right? Not that a client has to come. Even if I offer it, it is considered to be in practice. Okay, so that is the point what they're trying to say. Okay, now going to section 2 is over now. I mean the to be in practice is over. We have a couple of important case studies relating to this. So if you want, we can first see that, or no, first I think I'll do a little more theory. Certificate of practice. Okay. No member of institute shall be entitled to practice whether in India or elsewhere unless he has obtained from institute a certificate of practice. So a COP is a must to do practice, and therefore you have to take it from the institute. Okay, you have to apply for it from the institute. So once a person becomes a member of ICI, he is bound by the CA Act and its regulations. If he appears before the income tax tribunal as an income tax representative after becoming a member, he could appear only so in the capacity as a CA and as a member of the institute. So now what is this point? Let me first do B and C, then I'll explain it together. See the C point. A member of institute cannot in any other capacity in which he can take up such practice separable from his capacity to practice as a member of the institute. Means what are we trying to say? Okay, I'll explain this to you. Okay, now listen carefully. It's very, very important, this point. I am a CA who is in practice. Okay, example. I am a CA. I am holding a COP of the institute. I am also a lawyer. Okay, and I'm also a member of bar council. So that means I am practicing as a lawyer and as a CA. Okay. Now you will have three kinds of work that you can do when you are doing this. One, work which only a CA can do. Second, work which only a lawyer can do. Third, work which either a CA also can do, a lawyer also can do. For example, first, work only a CA can do. Audit, only CA can do. Lawyer, right? Appearing in the High Court, only lawyer can do, right? Third, work which either a CA or a lawyer can do. Appearing before the income tax tribunal. Can even a CA do it? Yes, he can. Now the case comes. Okay. Situation is like this now. The work has come where you have to appear before the tribunal. Question is, can you do this as a lawyer or as a CA? You will say, I can do it as a lawyer, CA anyways. No. Once you have become a CA, if there is any service which a CA can do, right, then you have to do that service only as a CA. You can't say that I'm doing it as a lawyer. You cannot. Question, why? Right? What? If you're appearing in the High Court, you can't do that as a CA, right? So do that as a lawyer. We have no issues. But if there is anything which can be done by both of us, a lawyer and a CA, accounting, tax returns or tax related work, even lawyer can do, even CA can do. But now we want only you to do it as a CA. Reason I'll tell you. Tomorrow, suppose, due to some reason, that CA's certificate of practice has gone. Okay, he surrendered it or cancelled it or whatever. Now that person will say, I will keep doing this work. I will keep doing it as now a lawyer. I will do the same work that I was doing as a CA. I can continue doing it as a lawyer. I can't do audit, I agree. But I'll appear before the tribunal. Why? I am also a lawyer. I can do it. If you can do that work as a lawyer, then what was the use of that COP which you had? having a COP means that work can only be done as a CA, right? That is the whole purpose of it. If COP is gone and still I'm doing the same work which I could do as a CA in some other capacity, in some other degree that I have, then what was the use of this COP? Absolutely, it will lose its significance, right? So once they say you have become a CA, you're holding a COP, now whatever practice you do as a chartered accountant, if tomorrow COP is gone, you cannot do that work. And then you will say, I am a MCOM. I want to do accounting now. I can't do audit, fine, I'll do accounting. But accounting also you could have done as a CA. Now you can't do that also. That is the meaning of this B and C point. Okay. So that's my continuation of that point. A member not in practice cannot accept any engagement prescribed for a practicing CA. So if he surrendered his COP or there's some misconduct, any problem, then he cannot in any other capacity, in any other capacity, take up any practice separable from his capacity to practice as a member of the institute. So if COP is gone, then all those services which you are giving, which we saw that whole list of 22 points, plus all that accounts and audit and financial services and all that, you cannot do all that because that you could do only as a CA. I hope you understood this point, a very, very essential, important point. Okay. Then, cancellation of COP. COP shall be, these are all procedural points, okay, not very important. COP shall be liable for cancellation if the name of the holder is removed from the register, the council, after giving him reasonable opportunity of being heard, finds out that certificate was issued based on incorrect information, or he has ceased to be in practice, or he has not paid annual fees. You know, annual fees we have to pay. We have separate fees for ACA, FCA, for practicing, non-practicing members, and we have to pay it by 30th September every year. So if I'm talking of the year 2020-21, the fees for that have to be paid by 30th September 2020. So it's paid for that year in advance till September 20. And till 30th September, if you don't pay the fees, remember 1st October only, next day only, you are removed from the thing. This is a very, very odd, I would say, bad point. You will have to, your COP is cancelled. You are out of the register of members because you have not paid your membership fees. Okay, so it's like 30th September night, you are sleeping, you forgot, maybe you were busy in the audit season and you just slept and you forgot about paying the fees all these 6 months, you forgot, whatever reason. 1st October when you wake up, the first thing you will realize is that you will be getting a mail, you will be getting a letter from the institute saying that you are removed from membership. Removed, not directly out. Okay, in fact, even all your articles will be sent letters. Your principal is out. He is removed from membership for non-payment of fees. Just imagine the embarrassing situation you will be in. Of course, there's a corrective action. You can pay the fees and they will restore your membership right from that date. But this whole procedure is extremely, I find it very, very intimidating. It's very bad that immediately next day you remove him. Give him at least 10 days grace. He has forgotten, send him reminders. So institute says we send reminders on the till 30th September. We keep telling you, you have to pay. Why you don't pay? They are also right. But removing directly and sending letters to the whole world saying that you are removed, little embarrassing, right? So moral of the story, pay your membership fees in time. That's what I'm trying to say. Okay. When a COP is cancelled, you surrender the same to the secretary. That's okay. So that is about your COP. As I told you, your COP can be restored also. The council may restore the CAP on application made with some prescribed fee with effect from the date on which it was cancelled. So 1st October it got cancelled. From that date only it will do it because it was due to non-payment of the annual fee. And otherwise again institute will decide all the things and accordingly restore it. For non-payment of fees it is like this. For other things an institute has to be satisfied and then they will restore the COP. Okay, so I can surrender COP, I can restore it, I can apply for it again, they can restore it for me. It's all the part of the ethics. Okay, so all this my act allows me to do. I hope this is clear. Yes. So now going further, Let's do some practical problems with respect to what we have just learned. Okay. So come to the practical problems. See, what I've done is in this chapter, I have split the practical problems in two parts. Okay. One are the small case studies which will be happening and coming throughout the chapter, as and how we keep learning clauses, we will be having those case studies. And then I have an entire case studies, almost 100 case studies I've given separately also, apart from the case studies which are given during the clauses. Okay. So now I want you to come to those practical problems, which is at the end of the chapter. Okay. So let's go to that. Whatever we have learned in section 2, what we are allowed, not allowed to do, etc., that we will just see. So come to the last part, as in the practical problems. Practical problem number 1, which is an exam question. Okay, even May 18, it has come for 5 marks. So let us analyze the case. A CA in practice has been suspended from practice for 6 months and he has surrendered his COP. So CA in practice surrendered his COP. During the said suspension, though the member did not take any audit assignments because he suspended, didn't take audit, he undertook representation assignments for income tax. Okay. Now see, you have to see your Income Tax Act to see exactly what a CA is allowed to do, what a CA is not allowed to do. So representation I'm allowed to do, but I think tribunal and high court and all those things a lawyer would be allowed to do. Okay, so it depends on what your act allows you. But he took representative, whereby he would appear before the tax authorities in his capacity as a chartered accountant. So basically, can he take this representation ahead? That's the point. Or second question, Mr. Dice, a practicing CA, surrendered his COP, suspended, whatever. During the suspension, he designated himself as GST consultant, did the work of filing GST returns, made appearance as consultant before various related authorities. He contended there is nothing wrong in it, as he, like any other consultant, could take up such work. And is he right in his approach? So this is the point we were discussing about. Okay, all this while, the significance of having a COP. So how would you answer this question? Very important. In the case, a CA not holding a COP cannot take up any other work because it would amount to violation of the provision of the Act. If he is suspended, he cannot take up any practice separable from his capacity to practice as a member. This is because he is still bound by the provisions of the CA Act. If he appears before the IT authorities or GST, he is doing so only in the capacity as a chartered accountant, as a member of the institute. Having bound himself by the Act and all, he cannot set it at naught by contending that even though he can do it in some other capacity, then he would not be allowed to do it. Therefore, not allowed, accordingly guilty of professional misconduct. Okay, very important answer. You star mark this. Okay, ethics, they have a tendency of repeating the same questions over and over again. So you better do it properly. Second one, analyze the case. So he's saying that he wants to recruit personnel, select them to training, work studies. Can he do all this? Yes, it was in that list, remember? So council under section 224 has resolved that management services would include these services and therefore includes these services. Therefore, CA not committing any misconduct, he's allowed to do it. I hope you understood this. Problem number 3. So you got the question. The CA is giving portfolio management services for some of his clients. Will it be allowed? No. So how would you write the answer again in points? Section 224 of the CA Act. Resolution has been passed by the council. What management consultancy services would include, and in that advisory is allowed, issue of securities is allowed, drafting prospectus, documents with SEBI and all that preparation will all be allowed, no problem, but not permitted to do what? Not permitted to do broking, underwriting, portfolio, and therefore not allowed to do management of portfolios. So this is how you're supposed to be answering the questions. Okay. So what we learned in 224 and the basic things, what COP related stuff, for that these are the practical problems. I hope this is clear. Okay. That's all then now. Okay.